Once the carrier war started in earnest and the advance of the Americans and British was pretty much predetermined that it was going to work, there was a lot of rivalry. We had 27 Essex carriers. We had borne the brunt of the Pacific War at sea, and we didn't want any advice from the British, who were coming in from Europe and sort of piling on, and we thought we were going to get credit or spoils from victory. And more importantly, they were more interested in Burma and India and Malaya and colonial interests. But then the unexpected happened. Kamikazes started to attack American carriers. Our carriers had wooden flight decks, cut down on weight. They were easily repaired, and they allowed more planes per carrier. And guess what? They were very flammable. So when a Japanese Model 0 plane dived at 300 miles an hour with a 500 or 1,000-pound bomb full of gasoline, engulfed the carrier and burned it a great deal of it, and caused a lot of casualties. The British that we had underappreciated under Vienna came in, especially off Okinawa, and when a kamikaze hit a British carrier, it had an armored steel deck. And the British, in very conservative fashion, said, we're willing to do the greater labor for repair, and we don't need as many planes. We're going to compensate for the additional weight by slower speeds, or we're willing to take the wear and tear. But whatever their calculation was, they proved invaluable because they took prominent roles and they said, you know what, you Americans, you really didn't appreciate us, but here's a chance, here's an opportunity for us to really help out by putting our carriers in more exposed positions, because we're not vulnerable to the kamikazes in the way that you are. After Okinawa was declared secure on July 2nd of 1945, the distance from Okinawa to the mainland was not 1,600 miles, it was about 375 miles. Curtis LeMay, he had an animal cunning. He said, I've got 2,000 more B-29s on order, and there is 10,000 B-17s and B-24s, and they haven't been doing a damn thing since May, sitting over there in England, and the British want to get in on the kill. They've got 5,000 Lancasters that have a heavier bomb capacity than any American plane. Let's put 10 to 15,000 four-engine bombers on Okinawa, and let's have not 3 missions a week from the Marianas, let's have 2 a day. And his only worry was, could Dow Chemical build enough napalm? So he would have burned down the entire country of Japan by December of 1945 and killed probably 2 million Japanese.
We're continually moving in closer toward Okinawa Shima. Directly overhead, squadrons of dive bombers, our dive bombers, fly towards the island of Okinawa to meet the Japs. We can see the yellow smoke of the gunfire above the battleships. We are passing transports over our starboard and over our port as we plow ahead, headed for the beach and headed for the Jap.
We debarked from our ships. We landed on Okinawa, and we had no idea of what kind of resistance we will encounter. There were no Japanese, there were no natives, there was nothing. We made our way immediately to the airport that had been deserted by the Japanese, and we found a good many destroyed planes and bombs, but no resistance. By the end of the second day, we had crossed the island, and that was when our trouble began. Our progress was not by miles and not by hundreds of yards, but practically by inches, because the resistance was very strong. There's not a single one of my team who got away uninjured.
I have been asked whether, in the years to come, it will be possible to kill 40 million American people in the 20 largest American towns by the use of atomic bombs in a single night. I am afraid that the answer to that question is yes.
Would the world be better off if we had never understood how to split atoms? Yes, of course it would. But is it possible to go back and rewind that tape? And the answer is no, it's not.
This is really the culmination of a golden age of physics. It just so happened that Oppenheimer grew up in New York, and he was a bit spindly, and his father wanted to toughen him up, and so he sent him out to New Mexico to ride horses. He would take off on horseback riding trips into the wilds of New Mexico for 3-4 days at a time with a jar of peanut butter and a bottle of whiskey, and must have seemed like a good idea. So he knew this spot, and he knew how remote it was, and that is why Los Alamos today is where it is.
There was a kind of professionalism among scientists and engineers that their job was to do a very specific task and not to make political decisions. And with the dropping of the bomb, many of the scientists realized that there are moral consequences to their work.
Finally, after 3 years' work, the atomic experts were ready to test their first bomb. In the control shack was Dr. J.R. Oppenheimer.
The automatic controls got it now. Rob, this time the stakes are really high.
It's going to work all right, Robert, and I'm sure we'll never be sorry for it.
Well, in 40 seconds we'll know.
Minus 30 seconds. Now!
I know, every hour of the day, there's a whisper inside of her brain, telling me who to kill.
The actual seeing of what this uniquely destructive force that man was unleashing, and realizing that it was the same old human beings with the same old limited capacities, led him to then become quite philosophical.
Few people laughed. few people cried. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
He began to speak about the danger of the weapon. He began to oppose the so-called super bomb, one form of the hydrogen bomb. And it was because of his opposition. His security clearance was taken from him and he was humiliated.
And then Einstein, a few years later, saying that atomic weapons had changed everything except the way we think, that we hadn't understood, and I think we still don't understand that we have created weapons that can destroy us, that can end life on this planet, and we've done that.
The question will be, do human beings have the vision to address and to cope with, to survive?
I think the only hope for our future safety must lie in a collaboration based on confidence and good faith with the other peoples of the world.
That firebombing of Tokyo happened in one night. I think it's 80,000 Japanese are incinerated. Okay, let's talk about brutality. Now, the reason why Americans did that is because they knew the alternative was sending American kids onto Japan who would die doing that. And so the decision was it was better to kill a lot of Japanese civilians than it was to kill American soldiers. And that's also the reason that went into the atomic bombing. That's controversial, right? The Americans, why did they drop atomic bombs on the Japanese? There was no disagreement about that in the United States at the time, because it was a question of, are you going to send American young men your age, and millions of them would have died hitting the home islands, or are you going to do the bombing? And of course the Americans did the bombing. It's three really bad things that happened in 4 days. First, the United States drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 2 days later, the Russians pour 1.5 million people into Manchuria, the nightmare scenario of the Japanese army. And they know if this war protracts, the Russians are going to come down through Manchuria, down the Korean Peninsula, onto Hokkaido, and down the home islands. It'll yield a divided Japan if it goes on for a long time. Then you have the next day, the United States drops the second atomic bomb. The idea being, we're going to keep doing this daily or every other day, except we don't have any more atomic bombs, and we cannot build them quickly for a long time. So that's big bluff. The emperor makes an unprecedented radio broadcast to his subjects telling them, game over.
Most people think that Japan surrendered because of the 2 atomic bombs, but in reality, they surrendered for something far more terrifying. August 9th, 1945. While America dropped the second atomic bomb, Japan was ready to fight to the last citizen against America. They had millions of soldiers waiting. They believed Americans would eventually negotiate because invasion would cost too many lives. But something else happened that changed everything. The Soviet Union invaded Manchuria with 1.5 million troops, and the Soviets showed no mercy in Manchuria. Japan watched them steamroll through their forces in days, and unlike America, the Soviets wouldn't negotiate. They would occupy all of Japan, execute the emperor, and end the monarchy forever. Emperor Hirohito faced an impossible choice: surrender to America and maybe keep the throne, or face Soviet occupation and lose everything. 6 days after the Soviet invasion, Japan surrendered. The atomic bombs were devastating, but it was the Soviet invasion that shattered Japan's last hope. They surrendered because they were more terrified of Stalin than the atomic bomb. History is never what they taught you.
By 1945, we were so pissed off at the Japanese. We had destroyed their air force, we had destroyed their navy, we had destroyed their army. The population of Japan was down to about 1,000 calories per person, and yet they wouldn't surrender. From the Japanese point of view, it's a myth that the bombs won the war. What won the war was when Stalin finally was convinced that there were such things as atomic bombs. He was half convinced these were American pieces of disinformation. Stalin, having heard that the bombs really worked, moved up the date of the Soviet invasion of Manchuria to the 8th of August, between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The conventional air forces on our side staged the largest firebombing raid of the war on the 14th of August, after the Japanese were in the middle of their surrender negotiations. Our bombing was in northern Japan. It was like a way of telling the Soviets, back off, buddy. We're not going to let you in here. And then the Japanese leadership turned and finally realized that it was futile.
A lot of the people who died in World War II are civilians, and they starved to death. Huge numbers. In fact, at the end of the war in the Pacific, if you look at Japanese deaths from 41 when we get involved to 45, I can't remember the statistics, but it's like tens of thousands of Japanese are dying in 41, and you finally get up to hundreds of thousands in 44, but it's going into the millions in 45, and it's because of starvation.
Is this the intentional starvation of the hunger plan?
It's wartime. Yeah. It's just facts. If you're in a war where you've destroyed all transportation and the ability to get goods anywhere, and you've killed the farming population all over the world, you get famine. And by the way, this is an argument for when people say, well, the atomic bombs, can you avoid doing that? That ended the war really fast and probably saved millions of lives because they didn't starve. It meant the war was over and all of a sudden you're starting to ship food around.
This is just in, ladies and gentlemen. President Truman just announced the first ever use of a new secret weapon, an atomic bomb of unparalleled strength. The bomb was deployed 16 hours ago and engulfed Hiroshima in a mushroom of fire. Japanese officials have confirmed the immediate loss of over 78,000 lives following the blast, with the total number of casualties now exceeding 130,000. President Truman has called for Japan to surrender or expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
Sir, at the time that you first found out about the atomic bomb, did you regard it as a curse or a blessing to mankind?
Well, I thought it was a blessing. I thought it could be used and made a blessing. I never worried about it being a curse. I wanted a weapon that would win the war, and it did. That's what I was interested in.
The second bomb was intended for the city of Kokura, but it was too cloudy, so the plane moved on to Nagasaki. Desperately short of fuel, the crew released the bomb despite more clouds. The bomb missed the aiming point and fell into a valley. This time there was no firestorm, but even so, more than 50,000 people were killed. The Supreme War Direction Council in Tokyo was meeting on the same day. By now, the Russians had declared war on Japan. Then came the news from Nagasaki.
天皇の国宝上の地位を変更しないことのみを条件としたい。私も同意見である。
すぐにでもアメリカに連絡を取って我々の真意を明らかにしなければならないね。
待て。事態は何も変わっていない。つまり国体の護持に加えて保障占領区域の制限、武装解除と戦犯処置は日本人の手に任せること。この4つの条件なしでは譲れない。そのような条件を出して決裂したらどうするのか。 最後の一戦を交えるのみ。今なお300万余の将兵が義務の命ずる以上の戦闘を続けている。5000機の特攻隊が敵の九州上陸を阻むべく引きを上げている。
敵の上陸第一陣を打ち倒すため全軍を投入すればその後が続かん。
たった4日で2つの原子爆弾、2つの都市が一瞬にして消えたのだぞ。次は東京かもしれない。
それが原爆かどうかは調査の結果を待たねばならん。
その爆弾が今ここに落ちたら天皇ご一家も無事ではおられない。町は混乱し予想しえない。
降伏より真に戦って散る方を選ぶ。
Then Prime Minister Suzuki did something unheard of. He asked the Emperor to break the deadlock and make a decision. Emperor Hirohito told them he wanted to end the suffering and bear the unbearable. 4 days later, radical soldiers attempted a coup to prevent the surrender. They failed. At dawn, on the day that Emperor Hirohito was to broadcast an announcement to the Japanese people that the war was over, General Anami prepared to end his life in the time-honored tradition of seppuku. His suicide note read, "My death is my apology for my great crime." The war was over. At last the troops were going home. There was jubilation around the world.
The Japanese are amazing. Think about it. They're on the group of 7 major economies. They're the only non-Western power there. And they don't get there out of charity. It's out of their own achievements. And what's tragic about World War II is if they hadn't done that, people will be looking at the Meiji reforms in order to model what they're going to do to get over the hump and develop. And in fact, a lot of the things that Deng Xiaoping does in terms of investments and things rhymes with Meiji reforms. And if you look at the 4 little tigers that originally is Singapore, Hong Kong, and Korea and Taiwan, a lot of their development, it parallels in a lot of ways of what the Meiji reformers did. Well, these are Japanese ideas, but they're not getting credit for them because of the brutality of World War II, where you're thinking of that and thinking, well, if I say nice things about Japan, I'm endorsing this other stuff. No, they're 2 separate topics, different generations.
tribunal.
Judges from Britain, America, Russia, and France assemble in Nuremberg's courthouse. Empowered to impose sentence of death, or such punishment as it may consider just, the tribunal sits in judgment upon 20 leaders of the Nazi Party. After a first day spent in reading the 30,000-word indictment, the unemotional tones of Lord Justice Lawrence, President of the Court, open the second day's proceedings.
On Thursday, the 18th of October, 1945, in Berlin, the indictment was lodged with the tribunal, and a copy of that indictment in the German language has been furnished to each defendant and has been in his possession for more than 30 days.
So begins the case of humanity against the makers of war.
The defendants to plead guilty or not guilty to the charges against them. Hermann Wilhelm Goering.
Thinner, and without the notorious medals, the once mighty Nazi number 2 still postures in the limelight. While he waited in the dock, he wrote a statement which he tried to read before entering his plea. He said, "Before I answer the question whether I am guilty or not guilty," and that was as far as he got.
Bevor ich die Frage des Gerichtshofes beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne, I informed the court that defendants were not entitled to make a statement. You must plead guilty or not guilty. Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Furious, the one-time Reichsmarshal shouts, "I declare myself not guilty." And now Hess, the mentally hazy Hess, the lost memory man.
Rudolf Hess. That will be entered as a plea of not guilty.
Ribbentrop, pale, nervous, picks up the refrain of not guilty.
Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage für nicht schuldig.
Object lessons in psychology. The character of each comes out in the manner of his not guilty plea.
Wilhelm Keitel. Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig. Wilhelm Frick.
Ex-Minister of the Interior.
Nicht schuldig. Julius Streicher.
Pronounced sane by medical experts, Jubater number 1 stands trial with arrest.
Nicht schuldig. Walter Funk.
This is Hitler's ex-economic advisor.
Ich kenne mich nicht als schuldig. Hjalmar Schacht.
Hitler's money wizard varies the words, but still pleads not guilty.
Ich bin in keiner Weise schuldig. Erich Raeder.
Ex-U-boat chief.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
The Nazi youth leader.
Baldur von Schirach. Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage als nicht schuldig. Arthur Seyss-Inquart.
Ex-Gauleiter of Holland.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig. Albert Speer.
Now the backroom Nazi and armaments chief.
Nicht schuldig.
There have always been ambitious and ruthless men ready to gamble with the lives of their fellows. Now, for the first time, international gangsters stand trial as common criminals. Goering, still trying to read his statement, and still getting nowhere.
You are not entitled to address the tribunal except through your counsel at the present time.
Opening the Allied case against the defendants, Chief American Prosecutor Justice Jackson.
Of opening the first trial in history,
for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
Goering was still switching from glum despair to spells of clowning at the end of the second day's proceedings. But the lengthening lists of counts covered by the indictment left its mark on everyone but Hess, who showed little interest in anything. Goering wrote sheet after sheet of notes and suggestions for his defending counsel. Ex-War Chief Keitel and Ribbentrop spoke only rarely. Hess came to life once. Perhaps he'd forgotten to remember he'd lost his memory. On the third day, Major Coogan took over the prosecution.
First, a brief reference to the history of the Nazi Party. The court will no doubt recollect that the National Socialist Party had its origin in the German Labor Party, which was founded on the 5th of January, 1919 in Munich. It was this organization which Hitler joined as 7th member on the 12th of September, 1919. At a meeting of the German Labor Party held on the 24th of February, 1920, Hitler announced to the world the 25 theses that subsequently became known as the unalterable program of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. As a new religion, the faith of the blood, superseding in individual allegiance all other religions and institutions. The defendant Rosenberg and the defendant Streicher were particularly prominent in disseminating this doctrine. Much of the evidence to be offered in this case will illustrate the Nazi conspirators' continued espousal and exploitation of this master race doctrine.
Imagination sickens at the crimes laid upon the accused, now stripped of the trappings of power. The world's writ has run to Nuremberg, and justice waits.
Just a few simple queries, Your Honors. Won't take more than a moment. You implied to this court that you lost some influence with Adolf Hitler in 1942. Is that correct?
I believe this to be the case, yeah.
But you were still Reichsmarshal of Germany in 1942, Hitler's successor, yes?
Yeah, I was the Reichsmarshal.
And you're telling me that you were totally unaware 3 million Jews were murdered in 1942.
I was unaware of this.
In 1943, at least 800,000 Jews were executed in the camps. You were still Reichsmarshal in 1943. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In 1944, an additional 800,000 Jews died in the camps. You were still Reichsmarshal in 1944. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In 1945, 250,000, an estimated 6 million Jews in total, as well as Soviet and Polish citizens, Romani people, artists, scientists, writers, journalists, photographers, filmmakers, people killed, not in combat, not
in enemy fire, but exterminated by the state of Germany, the state which you were the Reichsmarshal of, the preeminent political post of your country. And you contend that you had no knowledge. At least give me this. Knowing what we know now, knowing what happened to 6 million Jews, I have to ask, would you still follow the Führer, Adolf Hitler? Ja. Erfurt. Order! Order! Heil Hitler. No further questions.